because I'm probably not going to talk about the things you want me to talk about. I've been asked, did I do a deep dive on the inauguration? And I actually did it, not a deep dive, but I took a look at the chart back in June and kind of closed the app and went, no, I don't want to look at that. And probably not for the reasons you're thinking. It just is a volatile day. It's an interesting day. It's weather. I said it would be like maybe windy or wet. That's precipitation, which could be snow. It's not just rain. Um, and there were surprises involved, you know. So I've said in the past, I wasn't convinced there was an inauguration for whatever reason. Still don't know. We'll find out today. Um, I can't say if there is an inauguration of a particular person who's kind of treated like Voldemort, you know, who shall not be named. Um, he's not going to be there long. I just I have looked at those transits of that person's chart over and over, and in fact, medium Matilda, and I were on the phone, and I actually went through my process with her. I said, this is what I do. If this was my client and I actually like this person, this is what I would say. And one of the things I said is there's people in your circle, these are people you have really, you think you have strong agreements with. They're actually not doing you any favors. Um, you're not going to be able to pivot the way you normally pivot. You're not going to be able to use your genius, quote unquote, because of that. His Uranus is being squared by Venus and Saturn. You could be making some bad financial decisions or a bad deal, you know. And normally where you have good fortune, like there's some kind of communication that's going to diminish that. We saw that yesterday on the 19th. So that's all I'm going to say about it. Okay. To the people who are coming here from TikTok to get the skinny, who haven't listened to my podcast at all, and you're just coming for gotchas and stuff, whatever. Okay. I couldn't care less. I'm here to talk to the people who want to learn more about energy, how to surf the cosmic tide, and what I'm going to do to support that is less about the outer world events, and we're going to focus on some inner world events. Okay, because we do have the Venus Saturn conjunction going on, and that is some real freaking magic. Real magic where you can distill your hopes, dreams, and aspirations into a crystallized form, like make it physical, make it real. And to kind of talk about that, I invited one of my clients, Brendan Windsor. I invited one of my clients, Brandon Windsor, who just wrote the book Good Love. Okay, the Good Love novel. And it's a rom com. And Brandon is a TV writer, and he came to me during the strike. He had an idea, he wasn't sure about it. His life was not operating the way he wanted it. And I was doing a consultation reading with him, and he just happened to have some great transits for taking on the project of writing a novel. And we talk about that later on in the podcast, and which it's a great book, by the way, and not just because he's my client. I'm very, very picky about the books I utilize what's left of my eyesight on, and it's a great read. So it's super fun, and we talk about that. We talk astrology, so we have that on the podcast. And why did I have him on? Because he realized a vision. Venus conjunct Saturn, he realized a vision. So that Venus conjunct Saturn is a very interesting transit. So there's that. I'm also going to do a little bit of reading from The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's actually a philosophy book more than anything else. It's not as much about fighting as you might think. And then of course, I think we all need to put our attention to something more important than the drama out in the world, and that is it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's MLK Day. And I want to start the podcast out with, and I'll probably have already done so, with this beautiful quote. Um, and it is May I stress the need for courageous, intelligent, and dedicated leadership, leaders of sound integrity, leaders not in love with publicity, but in love with justice, leaders not in love with money, but in love with humanity, leaders who can subject their particular egos to the greatness of the cause. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So there we go. May we all hold that quote in our hearts and our hands. Before I get going with what the rest I'm going to talk about, I just want to tell you a quick story about the first time I found out about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I was in kindergarten, and they played his on an old film projector. He um, he wrote. Sorry, when I was in kindergarten, they played us a film reel of Dr. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, and I was enamored, and I was in love with this man, with his whole heart speaking. And I thought, I have that same dream. I wanted people to get along. I don't like fighting. I have a Libra moon in the 11th house. And was so enamored with this man who spoke of love and spoke of seeing us all, being able to see each other as human beings. And when school was out, I was so excited to tell my mother about this man. And this would have been 1974. And when she picked me up from school, I said, Mama, 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 I want to meet this man. His name is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he has a dream, and it's the same one I have. And my mom got very serious, and she said, Oh, Lori, I'm so sorry, but they killed him. And I said, No, no, because somehow, I don't know if they had mentioned it or I had missed it because I was so excited to hear about this man. And my heart just broke, and I was inconsolable as a 5 year old because when we're small children, we listen with our heart space, right? We don't need another one. We need to remember what the great teachers have taught us. We don't need another Mr. Rogers. We don't need another Dr. King. We need to remember the lessons and the wisdom that they shared with us so we can walk in step together to create the world we want to live in. And sometimes when things seem lost, when some things seem irreparable, when some things seem dismal and gray, it might feel hard to step up to that. And yet it is a privilege to lament and luxuriate in despair when so many people are just trying to survive. It's important to remember that each one of us has the ability to rise into our greatest purpose, right? Each one of us has the ability to make a difference. And in order to do that, we have to do that from the inside. So that's what this podcast is about. Again, I'm going to have Brian Windsor on the show. You'll see that. I'm going to put some clips up on YouTube for that episode because we had a great time and he shares a lot of wisdom about making the most out of some of your hardest times. That's what he was doing when he was writing his book. The next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to, of course, do patron shout outs. We got a bunch of new patrons this week. As you know, the show is 100% listener supported. And the other thing we've got going on is I'm going to read the headlines. We've got the interview, And then I'm going to read you a favorite bit of mine from The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And if you're wondering, what does that have to do with astrology? Well, remember, astrology reflects everything. And there's some very valuable information in that book. It is a philosophy book, and astrology is also philosophy. So we'll talk about that later on in the podcast. Um, but first, let's take a look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s chart, because I think that's the astrology we should be looking at today.